Hello, friends. If you're excited to dive into the story of Until Dawn 2025 in English, don't forget to give this video a thumbs up. It really helps us out. And if you're new here, hit that subscribe button and join a community that loves exploring the best movies. Let's get started. It begins, as the best horror stories do, in isolation. A storm sweeping in through frozen hills. A creaking cable car suspended between mountains. 8 friends reunited for a weekend of memory, escape, and maybe, though they won't admit it, atonement. They laugh too loudly, hug a beat too long, and try not to look too hard into the past. But the snow keeps falling, the air thickens, and somewhere deep in the trees, something ancient has begun to stir. Something that doesn't forget. What makes this story stand apart isn't just its setting or even its scares. It's the way it pulls you into a narrative that feels both cinematic and personal. Like you're not just watching these friends fight to survive, but choosing, step by step, how they fall apart. Every conversation matters. Every decision cuts a new path. And the question that grows louder with every heartbeat isn't what will happen next, but what would you have done differently? At its core, the film is a layered thriller, draped in slasher tropes but carved with a psychological knife. The reunion is meant to heal old wounds, taking place exactly 1 year after a tragedy that fractured the group, the disappearance of 2 sisters on the same mountain, under circumstances no one dares to recount in full. Each character is burdened by that night, by what they saw, by what they said, and more importantly, by what they didn't say. And now, as they return to the site of that trauma, it becomes clear. The past hasn't stayed buried. The mountain lodge they arrive at is a fortress of memory. Spacious, shadowed, luxurious, but cold in a way that heat can't touch. Voices echo down hallways too long for comfort. Doors creak even when no one moves. The power flickers, not from faulty wiring, but from something more primal. And then there are the signs. The whispers. The unmistakable sense that they are being watched. The story starts slow. It lets you breathe. It lets you think you know where it's going. Characters bicker, flirt, reminisce. They take selfies and drink too much wine. But underneath the banter is a tight coil of unease. The group is fragmented. Ex-lovers, strained friendships, unspoken blame. Alliances shift. Secrets flicker. And when a masked intruder appears in the night, when screams slice through the silence, it seems the nightmare has begun in earnest. But that's only the first layer. Because what seems like a slasher setup, a group hunted by a killer in the snow, slowly dissolves into something far older, far stranger. Clues left behind begin to tell a story not just of betrayal and guilt, but of legends buried deep in the land itself. Old mines beneath the mountain. Forgotten rituals. Spirits that twist hunger into horror. And a curse that does not punish at random, but chooses its victims based on what they carry inside. The true horror, it turns out, is not what's outside the cabin, but what's within each of them. One of the film's most brilliant elements is how it toys with your sympathies. Characters who begin as shallow, irritating, even cruel begin to show cracks of vulnerability. Others, seemingly virtuous, reveal darker impulses. And all of it is magnified by choice. Every major beat hinges on decisions made in the moment, whether to run or hide, to save yourself or someone else, to believe the unbelievable or hold fast to logic. These moments don't just shape the plot, they shape the people. And the consequences are permanent. There's a scene midway through that changes everything. A moment of betrayal, one that isn't a scream or a gunshot, but a quiet, devastating reveal of what someone knew and never said. The group splinters. Trust collapses. And from that moment on, survival becomes personal. They're no longer just running from something in the dark. They're running from each other, from regret, from the truths that won't stay buried. And as dawn creeps closer, the body count rises, not all by the same hand. But the twists don't stop there. The film folds in on itself again, peeling back its final layer to reveal that what they thought was real, The chase, the killer, the cabin itself, may be something more constructed than they ever realized. There's a twist hidden behind the twist, a reveal that recontextualizes everything before it, all while amplifying the stakes to their final, breathless crescendo. What began as vengeance ends as sacrifice. What began as guilt ends in understanding. And when the final light of morning cuts through the trees, the question remains, who deserved to make it until dawn? Along the way, the film weaves its terror through atmosphere, not just action. The snow muffles everything. Footsteps, screams, even gunshots. The woods are vast but claustrophobic, every tree a potential threat. Flashlights reveal too little. Footprints vanish quickly. And the mountain itself feels alive, groaning with wind and age. The sense of isolation is complete. There's no signal. No escape. No one coming. The lodge becomes a crucible, forging fear into something raw and honest. Yet even amid the dread, there's beauty. The cinematography captures the mountain in wide, glacial stillness, moonlight bouncing off frozen branches, distant peaks shrouded in fog. And inside the lodge, where the firelight flickers against glass and shadows stretch like tendrils, there are moments of connection. Characters who feared each other begin to forgive. Those who seemed weak stand tall. And the cost of each life lost is not just horror, it's grief. The final moments are unforgettable. The last survivor, or survivors, stand bloodied, hollow-eyed, blinking against the sunrise. The lodge behind them smolders. The woods are silent once more. And though the nightmare has ended, it hasn't disappeared. It waits. Because the mountain does not forget. It watches. It chooses. And it will call again. This story may wear the skin of a horror film, but beneath that is something much deeper. A meditation on trauma. A reckoning with guilt. A reminder that fear isn't always what chases you through the woods, it's what you bring with you. And for those who thought they knew what it meant to survive the night, they'll learn. Survival, here, isn't the end. It's just the beginning. The story opens like the first breath before a scream. Quiet, cold, heavy with something unspoken. A cable car climbs slowly through thickening snow, suspended between two peaks as silence presses in on either side. Below, the trees look like sharpened needles, black against white, and the air seems too still, too quiet, as if the entire mountain is holding itself in. Inside the cable car, laughter tries to fill the void. It doesn't quite work. 8 friends, older now, but still echoing the voices they had a year ago when everything fell apart, arrive at the mountain lodge. It's tradition, they say, returning to this place. A way to remember, to reconnect, to move on. But even as they smile and tease each other, there's a crack in the joy, a split down the center where grief lives. Because not everyone made it back. Last year, in the same lodge, under the same sky, something terrible happened. 2 sisters vanished. Disappeared into the snow without a sound. And though their names are barely spoken, they haunt every moment. The lodge looms like a monument to unfinished stories. All stone and timber, with wide windows that reflect more than they show. It sits alone on the ridge, miles from the nearest road, surrounded by snowdrifts and whispering woods. A generator hums quietly in the background. Inside, the fire has already been lit, but it gives off no warmth. The walls are filled with photos, framed memories of weekends past, but somehow they all feel distant, like pictures from another life. Josh, the brother of the missing girls, has invited everyone back. He's different now. Not broken exactly, but brittle, like a photograph left in the sun too long. He insists the weekend is about healing, about moving forward. But his eyes are too sharp, his smile too rehearsed. He drinks quickly and too often, always the first to crack a joke and the last to laugh. The others don't know what to say to him, not really. So they default to small talk. Games. Drinks. Anything to avoid the tension humming underneath it all. The group is a web of tangled connections. Mike and Jessica, new flames, cling to each other with the desperation of distraction. Emily, sharp-tongued and unforgiving, arrives with a new boyfriend, Matt, who doesn't yet realize he's walking into a fire. Ashley and Chris, the slow-burning almost love story, orbit each other like planets unsure whether to collide. And then there's Sam, quiet, thoughtful, trying to stay above it all but unable to shake the feeling that something is deeply, terribly wrong. As the night falls and the storm settles in, the group begins to splinter. Mike and Jessica steal away to a remote guest cabin, their breath visible in the cold as they follow a trail of barely lit paths. Their flirtation masks a deeper tension. He's trying to forget the past, she's trying to prove she matters in the present. But every step deeper into the woods feels like a step away from safety. Trees close in. Animal tracks appear and vanish. Strange noises echo, high, sharp, inhuman. Back at the lodge, the others split into smaller groups, exploring the old building and its surroundings. Chris and Ashley find themselves in the study, where old books and dusty photographs whisper stories of the mountain's darker history. There are mentions of an abandoned sanatorium nearby, of disappearances, of strange symbols carved into trees. Josh shrugs it all off. Just folklore, he says. Just old stories meant to scare children. But his fingers tremble when he says it. As the group moves deeper into the night, odd things begin to happen. Doors creak open on their own. Lights flicker, then go out entirely. A power outage forces them to split up to reset the generator. And then a scream. Not from inside the house, but from the woods. Mike and Jessica, now in the guest cabin, hear it first. Jessica runs outside to investigate, barefoot in the snow, the cold biting into her skin. And then she's gone. Just like that. Mike gives chase, stumbling through the woods with only a flashlight, calling her name over and over. He sees flashes, a shadow moving through the trees, fast, too fast. A flicker of red. A gloved hand. And then, silence. The kind of silence that makes your ears ring. He finds the edge of a cliff and nothing beyond it but the drop. He screams her name, but there's no answer. Back at the lodge, the generator finally roars back to life, but it brings no comfort. Josh is missing. The front door is ajar. Footprints trail off into the dark. Chris and Ashley go looking for him, their flashlights cutting weak paths through the snow. They find a shed with blood on the door. Inside, something is hanging. But it's not Josh. Not yet. Suddenly, a masked figure appears. It's not a man. Or if it is, it's not just a man. The mask is too smooth. The eyes too hollow. It moves without sound. Without breath. Chris is knocked out. Ashley is taken. The camera lingers on her face, frozen in terror, as the door slams shut behind her. And then everything goes black. When Chris wakes up, he's tied to a chair. Across from him, Ashley. Bound. Afraid. Josh stands between them, laughing, jittery, unstable. He begins a twisted game, forcing Chris to make an impossible choice. Save one, lose the other. It feels like a prank. Like a performance. But when the saw starts to move, when the blood starts to spill, it becomes very, very real. Nothing makes sense. Is Josh behind everything? Is this revenge for his sisters? A test of loyalty? A descent into madness? Or is there something else? As dawn remains a distant promise, the friends begin to realize that the mountain isn't just a place. It's a presence. Watching. Judging. And beneath its frozen ground, something ancient has begun to wake. The lodge, once a place of reunion, becomes a labyrinth. Hallways twist. Voices echo from rooms that shouldn't exist. The power cuts again. Phones are dead. The storm thickens. And every decision becomes a matter of survival. But survival, here, isn't just about avoiding death. It's about facing what they've done. And what's coming for them in the dark. Some stories unravel slowly, pulling thread after thread until what remains is raw and exposed. Others snap like a broken branch underfoot, sudden and loud. But here, on this mountain drenched in snow and silence, the story does both. It peels back layers with each heartbeat, until what once felt like coincidence begins to feel deliberate. And every step these characters take deeper into the night becomes a step into a truth they were never meant to survive. After the horror in the shed, the blood, the impossible choice, the scream that cuts too short, Chris stumbles back into the night, barely able to stand. The air feels thinner now. The cold sharper. The wind is no longer just weather. It's a whisper, warning them to leave, though there is nowhere left to run. Ashley, traumatized and silent, clings to him as they make their way back to the lodge, their footprints swallowed behind them. But something has shifted. Josh is gone. The body in the shed has vanished. And somewhere, not far, a laugh echoes, distorted, unhinged, too human to be safe. The group is fractured now, scattered across the mountain like broken pieces of a mirror. Sam, who had taken a quiet moment alone, returns to find the front door ajar, blood on the stairs, and no one left inside. She moves through the house in silence, every floorboard creak a gunshot in her ears, every shadow a threat. And then she sees it, a camera. Recording. Watching. Hidden in the vent above the fireplace. She follows its cord. It leads to a secret room. Inside, monitors flicker with grainy footage of each of them. Moments stolen from throughout the night. One screen shows Jessica screaming in the cabin. Another shows Ashley crying in the shed. On one, Sam sees herself, only minutes earlier, walking down the hallway. She turns slowly, realizing she's being watched even now. And then the screen goes dark. From here, the story spirals. Because what they thought was a slasher mystery, a friend-turned-killer, a night of revenge, begins to unravel into something more sinister, more tragic. Josh reappears, but not in the way anyone expects. Tied. Disoriented. Ranting about voices in the mine. About something beneath the mountain that isn't human. Something that speaks in hunger. The others don't believe him, until they hear it for themselves. A scream from the woods. Not Jessica's. Something older. Inhuman. Mike, still desperate to find Jessica, stumbles upon the entrance to the old mine. He doesn't want blood. He wants acknowledgement. He wants someone to say, "I remember them too." But no one does. Not the way he needs. His unraveling is slow and painful. When the real horror reveals itself, when the thing in the woods is no longer just rumor, Josh is no longer the puppet master. He's another piece on the board. And it's in those final moments, wandering the mine, whispering their names, that his character lands. He doesn't die a monster. He dies a brother, searching for something already gone. Mike, on the other hand, is the kind of character who begins as an archetype. The golden boy. The leader. The flirt. At first glance, he seems built for this genre. The kind who gets the girl, makes the big move, saves the day. But what makes his journey interesting is how quickly that facade breaks. When Jessica disappears, something in Mike cracks open. Not just panic, but purpose. The playboy vanishes. What's left is raw instinct. He runs through the woods not because he thinks he can win, but because he has to. Because guilt is faster than any fear. Throughout the film, Mike sheds his ego piece by piece. His confidence is replaced by desperation. His swagger replaced by sweat and blood and dirt. By the time he finds Jessica again, he's not the man who brought her up the mountain. He's someone far more broken, and far more real. Mike's arc is one of redemption, but not the Hollywood kind. He doesn't get applause. He doesn't get closure. What he earns is understanding that survival isn't about strength. It's about sacrifice. and that sometimes the bravest thing you can do is admit that you were never the hero to begin with. Jessica herself is far more than the role she seems cast into. Initially painted as the flirt, the loud one, the joke, she surprises everyone, including the audience. Beneath her sass and sparkle is grit. When she's taken, when she wakes in the mine alone and battered, she doesn't fold. She fights. And not just for her life, but for her story. She doesn't want to be remembered as a victim. She wants to scream. To survive. To be heard. Her transformation is subtle but vital. She goes from side character to symbol. Not because of what's done to her, but because of how she endures it. And when she finally stumbles back into the light, into Mike's arms, she's not the girl he lost. She's the girl who refused to be lost. Chris and Ashley offer a quieter dynamic. Their relationship is built on what might have been, on the kind of affection that never quite turns into action. Chris is awkward, sweet, always trying to keep things light, but his humor is a shield. He's terrified, not of the woods, not of the monster, but of disappointing someone, of making the wrong choice. That fear becomes his greatest weakness, and ultimately, his defining moment. Because when he's forced to choose, when the blade is moving and the blood is real, Chris breaks. And then rebuilds. His arc isn't about bravery. It's about accountability. About understanding that good intentions mean nothing if they aren't backed by action. Ashley, by contrast, is intuition. She sees more than she lets on, feels everything deeply. And though she's often placed in the role of the one who needs saving, she rarely acts like it. She confronts. She questions. She demands truth when everyone else is hiding behind lies. And when the moment comes to speak or stay silent, she chooses to speak, even when it might cost her everything. Emily and Matt represent another kind of pairing. One built on tension, on imbalance, on the slow erosion of love into resentment. Emily is sharp, commanding, used to control. At first, she reads as cruel. But as the night progresses, her sharpness becomes an asset. She doesn't panic. She plans. She adapts. Her strength is often misread as selfishness, but she is one of the few who never waits for rescue. She rescues herself. Matt, meanwhile, is the slow burn. Underestimated. Quiet, but fiercely loyal. His arc is one of recognition, not just of what he's capable of, but of what he's allowed to want. He spends the early story trying to please, to placate, to smooth things over. But in the end, he chooses autonomy. He chooses himself. And it's that decision that saves him. Together, the group forms a mosaic of emotion and memory, of history and regret. They are not heroes. They are not victims. They are people, messy, flawed, reaching. And when the nightmare unfolds, when the mountain reveals its hunger, it is not strength that saves them. It is honesty, vulnerability, the willingness to admit that they've been wrong, that they've hurt each other, that they miss what was lost. The Wendigo, though not a character in the traditional sense, is the embodiment of their collective past. A creature born of hunger, literal and emotional. It mimics. It waits. It doesn't hunt blindly. It chooses. And in that, it becomes a mirror. What it devours is not flesh, but truth. And each character, before the end, must confront what they've been hiding, not from each other, but from themselves. Because in the end, the mountain doesn't care about apologies. It only listens. And it never forgets. Some film sets hum with quiet industry. Lights, cables, makeup calls, the constant rhythm of setup and teardown. But others, they pulse with something stranger. Something that makes the hairs on the backs of necks rise, even when there's no wind. Something that feels off, even if everything is going exactly according to plan. The making of this film was supposed to be just another shoot, A tight schedule, a snowy location, an ensemble cast rehearsing their lines and hitting their marks. But from the very beginning, people on set began to whisper. About the air. About the house. About the things that didn't make it into the final cut, not because they were removed, but because they couldn't be explained. It started with the location. The production chose a secluded mountain range for the majority of filming, aiming to capture the desolate stillness that the story demanded. The area was remote, so remote, in fact, that there was no phone signal for nearly 10 miles. Only one road in and out. The lodge, built decades earlier and long abandoned, was real. Its floorboards warped. Its walls water-stained. The crew was excited, thinking they had struck gold. It didn't need set dressing. It was already perfect. Too perfect, some would say later. On the first day of scouting, one of the location assistants walked the perimeter alone. He returned pale, shaky, claiming to have found a second building deeper in the woods. A smaller structure, rotting and half swallowed by snow. He went back with others, but it was gone. They searched for hours. Nothing. No footprints, no path. Just untouched trees and silence. "I know I saw it," he kept saying. "I went inside. There were books. Candles. Something was burning." He left the production 3 days later. Then came the basement. There was no basement listed in the architectural plans of the lodge. But during an early camera test in one of the bedrooms, a grip leaned against a wall that gave a hollow echo. Further inspection revealed a trapdoor beneath the bed. It led to a steep, narrow staircase made of stone. No lights. No insulation. Just a space that smelled of mildew and old iron. The crew debated using it for a few key scenes. But no matter how many times they measured the space, the dimensions didn't stay consistent. A hallway that was 5 meters long in the morning measured 4 by nightfall. "It doesn't want to be filmed," the director joked. But no one laughed. Not Jessica's. Something older. Inhuman. Mike, still desperate to find Jessica, stumbles upon the entrance to the old mine. The one they joked about earlier, the one that appears on no map but everyone seems to know exists. He descends alone, flashlight flickering, the silence absolute. He finds remnants of old equipment, broken carts, rusted tracks, claw marks in the stone. And then a photograph. Dated decades ago. Miners. Dozens of them. Smiling. But in the back row, a face that looks too familiar. A face that resembles Josh. Or his father. Or something pretending to be him. As he moves deeper, the mine seems to breathe. The walls close in. The temperature drops. And then, finally, Jessica. Barely alive. Trapped. Her eyes wide with terror, her body trembling not from pain, but from what she saw down there. What followed her? What watches from the shadows still? When Mike brings her back to the surface, the snow is heavier. The air almost electric. And now, things begin to converge. Sam finds Chris and Ashley. They compare stories. The inconsistencies. The timeline that doesn't add up. The doors that lock themselves. The power that dies every time someone gets too close to the truth. They realize the mountain isn't just haunted by memory. It's infected. By a presence. By something tied to the land itself. And then the twist. Josh, unraveling, finally confesses. The pranks. The faked threats. The blood that wasn't real. The cameras. It was all him. A sick, twisted attempt to make them feel the fear he's lived with every day since his sisters disappeared. He didn't plan to hurt anyone, just to scare them. Just to wake them. But he's not laughing anymore. Because something else is here. And he's seen it. Something that mimics. Something that remembers. They try to leave, but the cable car line has been severed. The radio tower destroyed. Trapped, they retreat to the sanatorium, a place they'd hoped was myth. But it exists. A relic from another time, forgotten by everyone except the mountain. Its walls echo with screams, its floors stained with old blood. Files remain, detailing patients who spoke of creatures in the mines, of hunger that could not be cured, of bones twisted into something other. In the sanatorium, the past crashes into the present. They find journals, maps, a diary written by one of the miners, chronicling the descent into madness after a cave-in, and the unspeakable things they did to survive. The film doesn't show it all. It doesn't need to. The pages say enough. Cannibalism. Ritual. A curse born not from superstition, but from something older. Something real. And that's when they understand. It wasn't just a disappearance. The sisters didn't vanish. They were taken. Transformed. Possessed by the very hunger the mountain feeds on. That's when the Wendigo appears. Not all at once. Just the sound first. A scraping. A snarl. A flash of movement in the dark. Then the lights go out, and screams replace everything. The group is hunted now. Not by a man, but by something that used to be human. Fast. Silent. Unforgiving. And worse, intelligent. It doesn't just chase. It plays. It separates them. It turns the night into a maze. Characters fall. One by one. Not because they make mistakes, but because they make choices. Choices that feel right in the moment. Sacrifices. Distractions. Pleas for forgiveness. Chris throws himself between the creature and Ashley. Emily, always the fighter, refuses to run. Josh, already broken, wanders into the mine, whispering his sisters' names, begging for them to still be there, somewhere beneath the horror. And through it all, Sam holds the group together. She sees what the others don't. She reads the symbols in the old journal, understands the rules. No fire. No eyes. No speaking its name. She leads the survivors toward the lodge one last time, not to escape, but to trap it. To seal the creature beneath the house, in the place it was first awakened. The final sequence is a race against time, a crescendo of breathless dread. They lure it in. They light the fuse. And then, silence. The explosion isn't massive. Just enough. The lodge crumbles. The snow turns black with ash. And as dawn finally breaks, what's left of them stands alone on the ridge, bloodied, hollow-eyed, but alive. A rescue team arrives. Too late, of course. But with floodlights and questions and warm blankets. The camera pulls back slowly as they're led away. No one speaks. Because what they've seen, what they've become, can't be explained. It can only be carried. And in the final shot, buried beneath the rubble, something stirs. Not dead. Just waiting. Because some nightmares don't end with daylight. They wait. Until dawn comes again. Some stories are driven by plot, by twists, by the slow climb to terror. But this one, the one carved into snow, shadow, and silence, is powered by people. Not just who they are on the surface, but who they become when the mask of safety is stripped away. When the storm closes in and no one is coming. When choices must be made not for glory, not for love, but for survival. It's in those moments that character becomes everything. And in this story, everyone carries a mask. Some wear it to hide. Others to protect. But all of them, by the end, must decide what to shed and what to keep. Sam is, in many ways, the quiet center around which the chaos spins. Not the loudest. Not the flashiest. She doesn't lead with force or with fear. But she listens. She observes. And when things begin to fall apart, she doesn't unravel. She focuses. From the moment she steps into the lodge, her calm stands out. It's not indifference. It's the weight of knowing that something fragile is being held together by pretense and that it will crack, inevitably. But she doesn't run from that truth. She prepares for it. Her strength is not in muscle or weaponry. It's in patience, in empathy, in clarity. While others lash out, while tensions flare and insecurities rise like smoke, she holds the line. That doesn't mean she's immune to fear. She feels it deeply. But she doesn't let it control her. Instead, she uses it, lets it sharpen her senses. She is the one who sees the camera, who follows the wires, who understands that the real danger might not be a masked man in the woods, but the secrets her friends have been too afraid to speak. Yet Sam is not perfect. Her greatest flaw is trust. She wants to believe the best in people, especially Josh. She wants the reunion to be more than symbolic. She wants healing, closure. And that hope blinds her, at first, to the undercurrents of pain and manipulation around her. When the truth starts to reveal itself, it hurts her not because it's shocking, but because it confirms what she tried so hard not to see. That sometimes, kindness can't fix what's broken. And then there's Josh, the architect of the weekend, the host, the brother whose grief is wrapped so tightly around him that it's curdled into something darker. Josh is a tragedy in motion. From the start, he smiles too wide, jokes too often, drinks too much. He tries to keep the energy up, to pretend this is just a normal trip, just a group of friends having fun. But underneath it all is a gnawing ache, grief weaponized, guilt twisted into revenge. Josh doesn't see himself as a villain. He sees himself as a mirror. He wants the others to feel what he felt, the panic, the helplessness, the loss. And in doing so, he crosses lines he can't uncross. A camera operator fainted on the first day of shooting in that space. He said he felt like something was pressing on his chest. Not hard, just enough to keep him from breathing right. His footage that day had odd interference, static that danced across the screen in patterns. The sound team later claimed to hear whispers in the background. Faint, indecipherable. Not feedback, not wind. Something else. They scrubbed the audio. They still couldn't remove it. Another time, during a night shoot, one of the actors was waiting outside the cabin for his cue. He was alone, headset off, going over lines. Suddenly, he heard someone whisper his name, soft, stretched out over the wind. He thought it was the AD calling for him, but when he returned to the monitor tent, no one had spoken. They showed him the playback. In the scene, just before he moved, there's a sound. Barely audible. A whisper. It wasn't scripted. The snow became its own mystery. Forecasts were erratic. The team had scheduled to shoot during a 10-day window of light snowfall. But instead, they got 3 consecutive blizzards, all unpredicted. Gear froze. Generators stalled. Visibility dropped to almost nothing. At one point, the director said it felt like the weather was reacting to the story, as if the mountain itself didn't want them to finish. Yet, oddly enough, the moment filming ended, the skies cleared. Bright sun. No wind. Not even a flake. One of the strangest days on set involved a mirror. There's a scene late in the film where a character glances at her reflection in a hallway mirror and sees something she can't explain. The mirror used was a real antique, borrowed from a nearby estate. The scene went well, until the footage came back. In 3 takes, the actor's reflection didn't match her movement. Not completely. A hand moved late. A blink happened twice. It wasn't a visual effect. It wasn't a glitch. They checked the rig, checked the lighting. Everything was perfect. But the footage remained off. Those takes never aired. They used a different angle instead. During filming, the cast and crew stayed in a nearby lodge. Rustic, quiet, warmed by firewood and old radiators. It was cozy, for the most part. But strange things began happening at night. Lights flickering on and off. Phones ringing with no one on the other end. One night, an actor woke to find snow footprints on her floor, melted halfway across the room. Her windows were locked. No one else had been inside. They reviewed security footage from the hallway. The timestamp skips forward 30 seconds. Just gone. The cast, despite the eeriness, grew close. They spent long hours rehearsing together by candlelight, often reciting their scenes in the lodge's main living room, surrounded by old hunting trophies and firelight. They began noticing patterns in their dreams, shared images. A room with no windows. A door that wouldn't open. A child's voice singing a lullaby none of them remembered learning. They joked about it at first. But when 3 of them described the same dream on the same night, it stopped being funny. One actor kept a journal during production. Near the end of the shoot, he tore out several pages and buried them behind the cabin set. They felt wrong, he said. Like they weren't mine. No one ever asked what they said. Even the Wendigo suit, designed with painstaking detail to be half practical, half CGI, seemed to carry its own weight. The first performer cast to wear it quit after one day, claiming it made him sick. Not physically, but emotionally. I couldn't think straight, he said. I put it on and I felt hungry. The replacement actor never wore the full suit alone. He insisted someone else be in the room. Just in case, he would say, without explanation. Oddly, the only thing that never malfunctioned on set was the vintage camera used for flashback scenes. A Super 8 model from the 1960s, found at a garage sale months before filming. It worked flawlessly. Every reel came back clear. But in every roll, somewhere between seconds 33 and 34, there was a flicker. A frame that didn't match. An image of the lodge, but empty. Different. As if filmed at another time. There were other moments. The prop book that kept ending up on the wrong shelf, even when locked away. The sled they used for a scene near the frozen lake that disappeared overnight, only to be found on the roof the next morning. The wolves that circled the set perimeter every night, never attacking, never making a sound. Still, through all the strange events, no one left. Not out of stubbornness, but out of something deeper. Respect. The director set the tone early. This mountain was here long before we were. We're guests. Let's act like it. That mindset trickled down. The cast lit a candle before each night shoot. The crew left offerings, bread, salt, old coins, at the base of the trees before dawn. Not out of fear. Just tradition. When the final shot was captured, Sam walking into the sunrise, alone and bloodied, there was no applause. No cheering. Just quiet. A long silence. The wind had stopped. The trees stood still. And someone, somewhere, whispered, "We're done." The editor, months later, swore that the raw footage whispered too. Faint, garbled voices under the dialogue. Audio techs claimed it was compression. But the editor wasn't convinced. "It's not in the audio," he said. "It's beneath it. Like the film recorded more than just what we saw." Today, the mountain remains off-limits for shooting. Permits denied. Locals shrug. They say the roads are impassable. The lodge was never torn down, but it doesn't appear on maps anymore. And those who worked on the film, well, they don't talk about it much. Not directly. But if you ask them, they'll pause. Look past you for a moment. Then say something like, "It was just a movie." And then, under their breath, almost too soft to hear. But not just. Some films scream to be noticed. Others whisper their truths beneath layers of shadow and snow, daring you to look closer, not for monsters, but for meaning. This one does both. It grabs your attention with sharp claws and masked figures, but lingers in your mind for reasons harder to name. What makes it endure isn't just the fear it conjures, but the questions it refuses to answer. The events that unfold don't merely shock, they haunt. And the deeper you go, the more you realize that every twist, every scream, every choice is part of a much larger, colder mirror being held up, not to the characters, but to the audience. Critically, the story was seen not just as a horror experience, but as a deconstruction of horror itself. A tightrope walk between genre homage and subversion. But to truly understand the impact it had, you have to unpack the events not just as plot points, but as critical statements. Each one echoes with emotional consequence. Each one is layered with commentary on choice, guilt, grief, and the psychological toll of survival. Let's start where the film's soul begins to fracture. Jessica's disappearance at face value, it's a classic move. Young couple leaves the group, heads into the woods, and the girl vanishes. But here, the scene doesn't unfold like a trope. There's a slowness to it, a sense of hesitation. As Jessica walks ahead into the fog, her laughter fading behind trees, you feel something twist. From that moment, he's not a cocky survivor. He's a desperate man looking for a piece of himself he didn't realize he cared about until it was too late. That shift, emotional, not just reactive, is what sets the tone for the rest of the story. Then there's the scene in the shed. Ashley and Chris, tied up. Josh standing between them like a conductor preparing an audience for a symphony of screams. The choice he presents isn't new. Save one. Sacrifice the other. But the weight of it, how long the camera lingers, how helpless the moment feels, forces the viewer into complicity. There's no right answer. No clean logic. And when the saw begins to move, when the blood splatters across the lens, critics didn't focus on the gore. They focused on what it meant. This scene isn't just a test of morality. It's a reflection of buried trauma. It externalizes guilt in a literal, horrifying way. Josh doesn't want Chris to choose. He wants him to suffer. To feel, if only for a second, the powerlessness Josh has carried since his sisters disappeared. Critics pointed to this moment as a pivotal turning point, not just in the story, but in tone. It's no longer about survival. It's about reckoning. And not with a killer, but with the weight of choices long ignored. The mountain setting, while visually stunning, also became the centerpiece of many critical discussions. It's not just a backdrop. It's a character. One that isolates, that consumes, that distorts reality. The weather isn't just cruel, it's conspiratorial. The fog erases paths. The snow covers clues. And the wind carries voices that may or may not be real. Every moment outdoors becomes a psychological trial, stripping the characters of comfort and forcing them inward, into their fears, their doubts, their past. When Sam finds the secret room in the lodge, the film shifts again. She's alone. There are no screams. No blood. Just screens. Monitors showing all of them, watched from hidden angles. It's a violation more terrifying than any blade. And critically, this moment is where the story's commentary on surveillance and voyeurism sharpens. The viewer, up until now, has been watching, judging, picking favorites, hoping some characters die and others don't. But now, you realize, you're not just watching. You're complicit. The camera has always been a weapon, and the film turns it on you. Then comes the mine sequence. Mike's descent is literal and metaphorical. He moves downward, chasing the illusion of safety, the hope that Jessica might still be alive. But what he finds is a graveyard of history. Old mining equipment. Scratched walls. A journal soaked in madness. The miners' transformation from victims to something else is revealed not with jump scares, but with quiet horror. Bones. Tools. Symbols. This is where the film's most enduring theme takes root. Hunger. Not physical, but emotional. The hunger for answers. For closure. For forgiveness. The Wendigo mythology doesn't exist just to scare. It exists to frame every character's arc through that lens. What happens when your need becomes more powerful than your morality? When your grief feeds on itself. The miners became monsters not because of what was done to them, but because of what they couldn't let go of. Josh's confession near the climax, admitting that much of the night was orchestrated by him, could have ruined the story. It risked undercutting the stakes. But instead, critics called it one of the most complex character beats in recent horror cinema. Because Josh's prank wasn't just revenge. It was grief manifest. His performance, twitchy and wild, wasn't about scaring his friends. It was about making them feel something. Anything. He needed them to remember. Not the girls, but what they lost when they stopped talking about them. And then, when the Wendigo arrives, when the mythology becomes reality, the film doesn't shift into creature feature chaos. It deepens. Because the true twist isn't the monster's existence. It's the understanding that it's not just a thing to run from. It's a consequence. A mirror. Critics interpreted the Wendigo not as a villain, but as a metaphor for the psychological transformation that trauma causes. It stalks the characters because it is them. Their fear. Their guilt. Their selfishness. And it kills with purpose. The final act becomes less about escape and more about endurance. Who can sit with the truth of what happened? Who can admit what they did or didn't do? When the survivors gather, broken and bloodied, they're not triumphant. They're hollow. Critics loved this choice. The film doesn't reward survival with redemption. It offers silence. Time to reflect. To mourn. That final shot, where Sam stands alone in the morning light, framed by the smoldering wreckage of the lodge, is not a victory. It's a pause. The camera lingers. She doesn't smile. She doesn't collapse. She simply breathes. Slowly. And in that breath, the entire film crystallizes. Survival, the film argues, is not the end. It's the beginning of reckoning. Audience reactions were deeply divided. Some came expecting traditional horror. Jump scares. A clean body count. They got something else, something slower, colder, more emotionally layered. Some viewers didn't know what to make of it, but others connected deeply. Forums filled with personal stories. People discussing the pain of memory, the complexity of guilt, the ache of unresolved loss. One viewer wrote, "It's not scary because of the monster. It's scary because it makes you think about the things you buried in your own life." The film wasn't made to entertain. It was made to reflect. And that's why, long after the final scream fades, it stays with you. Not in the closet. Not under the bed. But in the choices you remember making. And the ones you'll never forget. Some productions feel like blueprints brought to life. Precise. Controlled. Executed frame by frame according to schedule and plan. But others, rare, mythic in their unfolding, feel more like summoned stories. Pulled into existence by forces no one quite expected, filled with accidents that became art, and guided not by formula, but by instinct. This film was one of those. It didn't arrive cleanly. It emerged, piece by piece, through fog and failure and flickers of something uncanny. And behind the final cut that made its way to screens around the world was a process that felt as much haunted as it did human. It began with a script that almost never got green-lit. Originally conceived as a much more traditional horror tale, masked killer, remote cabin, fast cuts, high screams, the early drafts of the story looked very different from what audiences ultimately saw. But something about the first table read struck the director. Not in the performances, but in the pauses. In the silences between lines. In the way the characters didn't scream, but hesitated. That's where the real horror lived. Not in blood, but in silence. That's when the tone began to shift. The team took a gamble. They rewrote. Gone were the slasher cliches. In their place, grief, memory, hunger. The mountain became a character. The legend of the Wendigo evolved from local lore into psychological metaphor. And the timeline, originally told in linear chapters, was reshaped into a spiral. One of the film's most talked about moments, the basement monologue where Sam faces the truth about what happened to the sisters, was almost cut. Not because it didn't work, but because it worked too well. The scene wasn't scripted. The actress improvised the entire speech based on a dream she'd had the night before. No one knew she was going to cry. No one knew she'd reference the sound of dripping water or the coldness of the floor. And when she finished, no one yelled, "Cut!" The room just stayed still. When the crew reviewed the footage, half were in tears. One of the producers suggested removing it, fearing it might feel too raw for horror. But test audiences disagreed. That scene, many said, was the soul of the film. Lighting was mostly practical. Lanterns, matches, flickering bulbs. But there was one piece of equipment the crew grew suspicious of, a vintage spotlight that kept turning off by itself. It wasn't battery-operated. It was wired. But during 3 different takes, just as someone mentioned the mine, the light cut. Each time, the breaker box was untouched. The techs couldn't explain it. They stopped using that light, and started leaving a candle on set overnight. Just in case, they joked. Between takes, the cast developed rituals. Some sat in silence to stay in character. Others played games, especially late at night. Truth or dare. Ghost stories. They called it feeding the Wendigo. But after one particularly intense session, where an actor reportedly passed out mid-dare, they stopped. They wouldn't talk about what happened. Only that something changed in the room. The Wendigo design went through 12 iterations. Early concepts were monstrous, giant, antlered, grotesque. But the final version was subtle, lean, gaunt, human-like, but wrong in the joints. The idea was not to create something alien, but something familiar made terrifying. The makeup team used prosthetics and wirework, but avoided CGI whenever possible. The performer, a dancer with contortionist training, moved in slow jerks, sometimes crawling on all fours, sometimes completely still. The director would often let him improvise within scenes, hiding just out of frame, breathing shallowly until the camera turned. One take, never used, shows a character walking past a mirror, unaware that the Wendigo is crouched in the upper corner of the ceiling. Watching. Waiting. The actor never noticed. The editor only saw it during post. That footage became a legend on set. They wrapped shooting on a cold morning, under clear skies, the first day without snow in weeks. No celebration. No champagne. Just silence. The cast stood in a circle outside the lodge. Each placed a stone at the foot of the stairs. No one explained why. They just did. The stones are still there. During the editing process, something strange happened. A scene that had never been filmed appeared in a backup folder. A short clip, less than 4 seconds. A hallway. Empty. But the wallpaper didn't match any location they used. No actors. No motion. Just a flickering light and a shadow at the end. The editor assumed it was a mislabeled stock clip. But when they searched the metadata, it was dated 2 weeks before production even began. They never found out where it came from. Today, the film is praised not just for its atmosphere, but for its texture. The way it feels lived in. Weathered. Every frame carries the weight of its creation. Carefully, yes, but not perfectly. It's that imperfection, that chaos, that gave the movie its soul. Not everything went according to plan. But maybe it wasn't supposed to. Maybe some stories are told by people, and others are remembered by places. And maybe this one was both. It begins, not with a scream, but with a silence so deep it rings in your ears. A silence carved into the landscape like a scar, echoing through the snow-drenched pines and the craggy, wind-scoured mountains that tower like watchful sentinels over everything. Until Dawn, 2025, doesn't just tell a horror story, it traps you inside one, and it starts with where it places you. Blackwood Mountain, a remote, secluded stretch of wilderness far removed from the comforting hum of civilization. And once you arrive, there's no going back. Not really. This isn't just a cabin in the woods setup. It's a sprawling, multifaceted location layered with history, dread, and an almost supernatural sense of memory. The mountain feels alive, not metaphorically, but with a tangible pulse. From the moment the characters step off the cable car and onto the snowy plateau, every frame whispers of something ancient and watching. The lodge itself, once a luxury retreat, now stands as a monument to abandoned grandeur. Its wooden beams groan beneath the weight of time, and its ornate windows let in a pale light that never quite reaches the corners. Dust floats in the air like the ghosts of past visitors. There's a decadence here, decayed and forgotten. The grand fireplace, once the centerpiece of warmth and gathering, flickers with cold flame. The mounted animal heads on the walls seem to follow with glassy, unblinking stares. The chandelier above creaks gently even when the wind is still. Everything inside this place breathes with an uneasy tension, luxury turned lifeless, warmth turned into shadow. Outside, the wilderness is an entirely different beast. Snow stretches in every direction, thick and soundless, muffling footsteps and gunshots alike. Trees close in with sinister grace, their trunks dark and slick with ice, their limbs clawing skyward. The camera lingers often here, panning slowly through the thickets, capturing the suffocating density of the forest. It's not just isolation, it's entrapment. The mountains loom like prison walls. The weather, too, becomes a character. Whiteouts and sudden squalls become not just obstacles but threats. Snowfall isn't serene, it's smothering. Cold bites. Ice snaps. Every gust of wind feels like a whisper warning you to turn back. But no one ever turns back in stories like these. The game's influence remains clear, yet the 2025 film adaptation transcends its roots by diving deeper into the mood of its settings. Each location, every outbuilding, trail, and cavern, is shot with a deliberate sense of dread. The old sanatorium, for instance, is introduced not with bombast but with a slow, reverent fear. Its halls stretch long and empty, but the silence there is different. Less natural. It hangs in the air like breath held too long. Peeling walls, shattered glass, rusted gurneys, each detail is framed tightly, claustrophobically. Flashlights cut through the dark, always seeming to illuminate something that shouldn't be there. It's in this space that the film begins to layer its terror not just through plot, but through presence. The camera becomes voyeuristic. It hides behind corners, peers through windows, tracks movements just a second too late. Cinematographer Ana Lucia Bryan crafts each shot with a tension that simmers, never boiling over until the precise moment when everything breaks. There are no cheap thrills here. The scares come from knowing something is wrong long before anything happens. They come from suggestion, from anticipation. The forest feels too still. The hallways too quiet. And then, at the edge of the frame, movement. A shadow, perhaps. Or just a trick of the light. The film never tells you which. The mines beneath the mountain are the film's most haunting location. An underworld that spirals into madness. Descending into them feels like entering a different realm altogether. Here, the walls close in, the darkness thickens, and time seems to warp. The sound design shifts, distant cries echo without source, metal creaks somewhere above or below, dripping water sounds like footfalls. Flickering lanterns and fading flashlights provide the only illumination, casting grotesque silhouettes and distorting perspective. The camera work becomes unstable here, shaky, handheld, almost panicked. It's as though the mountain is reclaiming its own secrets, drawing both the characters and the audience deeper into its haunted heart. Color is used sparingly but masterfully throughout. The film leans heavily on desaturation, pulling life from the frames to leave only icy blues, steely grays, and harsh whites. Blood, when it comes, is a shocking red against the monochrome, a brutal reminder of life amidst the decay. Firelight and flare glow add sudden bursts of color, but they feel invasive, like something unnatural. They cast more shadows than they dispel. And then there are the dream sequences. Or visions. Or perhaps they're real, until dawn never fully clarifies. These moments break the film's visual logic. Suddenly, the color palette inverts. The snow turns black, the sky burns gold, faces flicker with inhuman expressions. These sequences, often stitched into character-specific arcs, add an element of psychological horror that transcends location. The mountain doesn't just trap you physically, it invades your mind. Memories blur. Guilt becomes hallucination. The past rises, not in flashback, but in bleeding, living memory. The filmmakers make deliberate use of long, lingering takes, shots that hold too long, letting the silence stretch taut. It's in these pauses that fear nestles, not in the jump scares but in the absence of anything happening. And always, in the background, the mountain waits. Not as a backdrop, but as a sentient force. It's a location with intention, a presence that guides fate and punishes arrogance. Every tree, every trail, every whispering gust feels like part of something ancient and vengeful. Lighting plays a crucial role in how the story unfolds emotionally. Interior spaces are often lit with single, flickering sources, candles, lanterns, flashlights, which limit the viewer's vision and draw attention to what can't be seen. Shadows dance across faces, and more often than not, expressions are read in fragments. A mouth in the light, but eyes in shadow. A silhouette at the edge of vision. These choices add to the film's pervasive sense of mistrust, not just between characters, but between audience and reality. Even the soundscape supports this feeling of unraveling. Wind, creaking wood, animal cries, these layer endlessly. But the most terrifying moments are often the quietest, when even nature seems to retreat. When characters stop speaking, and their breath clouds the air, and you realize how loud silence can be. These moments aren't accidental. They're weaponized. As the story reaches its climax, and the truths of the mountain begin to surface, the settings evolve. The once pristine snow is stained and broken. The lodge, once a refuge, becomes a battleground. The sanatorium collapses further into ruin. And the mines, those damn mines, become a graveyard of screams and fire. The geography of the film reflects the psychology of its characters. As their cohesion breaks, so does the stability of the setting. Paths become labyrinths. Familiar places distort. The mountain shifts, subtly but deliberately, as if reacting to the terror unfolding upon it. When the dawn finally breaks, it doesn't bring warmth. The sun cuts through the clouds like a blade, casting long shadows across the bloodied snow. Survivors, if there are any, do not emerge triumphant. They crawl from the wreckage hollowed, eyes haunted. And behind them, the mountain remains unchanged. Impassive. Eternal. As though the night was just another offering it required. Until Dawn, 2025, isn't about escape. It's about exposure. About what happens when you strip people down to their rawest fear and set them loose in a place that reflects it back at them 1,000-fold. The setting doesn't support the story. It is the story. And the cinematography, the lighting, the sound, they don't decorate the narrative. They breathe life into it. Or rather, they draw the breath out of it, leaving something colder, quieter, and infinitely more terrifying. This is a film that reminds us that true horror isn't just what lurks in the dark, but the dark itself. And on Blackwood Mountain, the dark has many faces. It began, as so many stories do, with a mountain, imagined first in code and concept, and then born anew in celluloid and snow. Until Dawn, 2025, was not simply a film adaptation of a beloved interactive horror game. It was a resurrection, an act of careful unearthing and reinvention. For director Calla Berenger, A rising force with a taste for atmosphere over exposition, the film was more than a remake. It was a haunted echo, one that demanded reverence for its roots and a boldness to chart new terrain. And behind the lens, beyond the snow-covered facades and flickering torchlight, a different kind of story played out, one of creative obsession, unpredictable weather, and the quiet, maddening beauty of trying to capture fear itself. The production began not on a stage or backlit, but in the wild. Berenger was adamant from the outset. There would be no green screen forests, no artificial snowfall, no digital mountains painted in post. She wanted reality to do the heavy lifting. So they found it, British Columbia, jagged and untamed, where mountain ridges carved the horizon and snowfall arrived uninvited. The base camp was set up near an old ski resort, long defunct, which mirrored eerily the very lodge that would become the story's central haunt. The location was remote, grueling to access, and temperamental. But it was perfect. Each morning, the crew ascended by snowcat or foot, sometimes taking over an hour just to reach the first mark. Batteries froze. Cameras jammed. Breath showed in every take, whether scripted or not. But it was worth it. There was something alchemical in the cold, a rawness that seeped into the film itself. Cinematographer Ana Lucia Bryan described it as chasing ghosts through the trees. Her lighting rigs were custom-rigged to mimic the inconsistent flicker of flashlights, her lens fogged purposefully during tight shots to mimic the character's breath. Nothing was clean. Everything bled texture. The mine sequences were filmed miles underground, in an abandoned silver mine repurposed for the shoot. It was damp. It was claustrophobic. And, at least once, it was nearly fatal. During a late-night shoot, a support beam gave out in one of the lower tunnels. No one was injured, but the resulting cave-in trapped 3 crew members for over an hour. Production halted while emergency teams cleared debris. The silence in that moment, they later said, was worse than anything in the script. Yet the danger added to the authenticity. The cast, already living together in a rented lodge to mimic the film's sense of isolation, bonded quickly, the lines between character and actor blurring in subtle, unnerving ways. The method approach was never enforced, but the mountain didn't give anyone much of a choice. Phones died. Communication with the outside world faltered. Meals were cooked communally. Fears, both real and imagined, became communal currency. Ella Paredes, who played Jess, kept a journal during the shoot, pages now water-stained and partially torn, but filled with entries like, "The wind sounds like it's breathing tonight," and "I saw something watching from the ridge, just past the set lights. Might have been a deer. Didn't feel like it." Berenger would later cite those journals as inspiration for several rewrites made on the fly. The script was a living document, molded by the setting. Some of the most chilling scenes, like the sequence in which a character's flashlight flickers out, only to flicker back on to reveal a figure inches away, were conceived not in the writer's room but on location, born of malfunction and instinct. Practical effects took center stage. No matter how advanced the VFX capabilities, Berenger insisted on tactile horror. The creature designs, while kept largely hidden in marketing, were rendered in painstaking prosthetic detail. A team of 3 worked on each actor playing the Wendigos, layering translucent skin, stretched muscle, and glassy contact lenses to evoke something both mythic and human. The transformation scene, a grotesque ballet of spasms and shadows, required 6 hours of application and 3 to shoot, accomplished in a single take. "It smelled like latex and sweat and terror," said costume designer Imani Cho, half joking, but when the camera rolled, everyone held their breath. We believed it. Perhaps the strangest story to emerge from the production was the mystery of the missing footage. On day 23, a sequence filmed in the upper lodge vanished from all digital backups. Footage from 3 cameras, synced across multiple systems, simply didn't exist. No corruption, no overwrite. Just gone. The crew dubbed it the Hollow Day. It was res-hot the following evening, though many swore the second version lacked something intangible, a detail no one could name. The original was never recovered. There were, too, the dream sequences, surreal interludes that pushed the limits of practical ingenuity. One shot, where a character's bedroom dissolves into a snow-covered forest in a single fluid pan, was executed without digital trickery. Production designer Layla Hart constructed a rotating set with sliding wall panels and integrated projection. The scene took 6 days to rehearse and 1 night to shoot. Hart's vision was obsessive. She built rooms down to the dust on the shelves, believing that authenticity whispered louder than artifice. "You don't have to see it," she said. "You feel it. That's the point." The score, composed by Isandro Fell, was recorded in a mountaintop chapel rigged for acoustics. The result was a chilling blend of organic resonance and electronic dissonance. Whined through pipe organs. Bowed cello strings recorded backward. Cracking ice layered into percussion. Fell even buried microphones beneath snowdrifts to capture the sub-bass rumble of avalanches and shifting frost, elements he later distorted into the film's soundbed. The music didn't underline emotion. It infected it. Even the actors contributed to the film's eerie tapestry in unexpected ways. During a break in shooting, lead actor Theo Carr wandered into the woods, alone, trying to find what he called the center of the fear. He returned 2 hours later, pale and wordless, and that evening delivered a performance so raw and unblinking that Berenger refused to cut until he collapsed. He never revealed what happened in the woods. It became an unspoken part of the lore. On set, fear was cultivated, but never forced. There was an unspoken rule: no joking before certain scenes. The atmosphere had to be preserved, especially during night shoots. Or something else. A sound technician swore his headset picked up whispering beneath the static. "It said my name," he claimed. He didn't come back the next day. But not all was dread. Between takes, there was camaraderie. Snowball fights in the dark. Shared flasks passed between crew huddled in the cold. Someone brought a projector, and one night they screened the thing against the side of the production trailer. The irony wasn't lost on anyone. They laughed, huddled in sleeping bags and folding chairs, while the wind howled just beyond the tree line. By the time filming wrapped, the mountain had taken something from everyone. Time, sleep, nerves. But it had given something too, a truth about fear and the fragile ways we carry it. The final scenes were shot at dawn, with natural light. No dialogue. Just characters standing on a ridge, looking out over a valley that would never quite be safe again. Berenger insisted the actors not rehearse. "You've lived it now," she told them. "React." Post-production was minimal by design. The editors, led by Noel Kim, approached the cut like surgery. Precise, quiet, measured. They retained the silence Berenger had crafted so obsessively. Often, they chose to hold on a character's reaction long after a scare had passed, allowing the dread to linger like breath on glass. It wasn't about showing the monster. It was about what came after. Until Dawn, 2025, wasn't built to entertain in the traditional sense. It was built to unnerve, to burrow. And behind every frame lies 1,000 unseen decisions, 1,000 frozen fingers gripping cables, holding lights, pressing record. It's a film born of hardship and obsession, where every snowflake and shadow carries the weight of effort unseen. And perhaps that's what makes it linger, not just the story on screen, but the story behind it. The mountain wasn't just a setting. It was a crucible. And those who went there, willingly or not, left something of themselves in its drifts. Something the film, quietly, carefully, never lets you forget. There's something different about stories told in the cold. Not just the way breath hangs in the air like vaporous punctuation, but the way time itself seems to slow. On the set of Until Dawn, 2025, this truth crystallized early. What began as a film shoot quickly unraveled into something closer to a social experiment. Drop a dozen people into a place so isolated it feels forgotten by time, stir in some manufactured terror, and watch what unfolds. Behind the cameras, away from the crafted suspense and orchestrated screams, was a story as strange and unforgettable as anything the film captured. They arrived in early January, when the mountain was still deep in winter's throat. The crew had leased an abandoned alpine resort as both base camp and primary filming location, a choice made for practicality, but one that would come to shape the entire production. No hotels. No quick runs to the store. Just snow, trees, and the occasional distant howl, which may have been a wolf or may have been the wind. No one ever quite agreed. The cast settled into their rooms on the upper floor, each assigned based on their character. An intentional decision by director Calla Berenger, who believed proximity to one's fictional self might yield unplanned magic. Jess and Mike, the flirtatious duo, were given rooms side by side. Sam was placed in the corner suite with wide windows overlooking the pines, an echo of her role as the film's watchful heart. Even in those early days, lines between character and actor began to blur in the quiet. Meals were communal. No trailers. No isolation. A small team of cooks kept everyone fed, but the cast often joined in, chopping vegetables in the flickering lodge kitchen, swapping stories over late-night bowls of soup. One evening, during a blizzard-induced power outage, they grilled sausages in the fireplace and told ghost stories while the wind rattled the shutters. Someone produced a ukulele. Someone else draped a bedsheet over themselves and moaned theatrically until a boom operator screamed and dropped his gear. Laughter came easy during the day. It had to. Because night shoots were a different animal altogether. Every night, the set changed. The forest took on new dimensions. Paths became indistinguishable. Camera markers disappeared beneath fresh snow. There was one particular spot, just beyond the tree line behind the lodge, that the crew began to avoid. Not for any real reason, at first. Equipment would glitch. Flashlights would flicker. One grip claimed he saw a figure standing among the trees, unmoving, long after the shot had wrapped. They dubbed it the patch. Eventually, it was written into a scene. Theo Carr, who played Josh, embraced the unease. Known for his immersive process, he refused to break character once the sun dipped below the horizon. He'd vanish for hours between takes, reappearing with wide eyes and frost clinging to his eyelashes. One evening, a production assistant found him sitting cross-legged in the snow, whispering dialogue from a deleted scene. "I wanted to feel what madness felt like," he later said, half smiling. "Turns out it feels like hypothermia." But the set wasn't all eerie silence and psychological games. There was warmth, too, unexpected pockets of camaraderie that bloomed in the bleakest conditions. When the generator failed mid-shoot one frozen night, plunging the entire lodge into darkness, it was Ella Paredes who rallied everyone with a dramatic reading of The Shining from memory. Wrapped in blankets, lit by candlelight and a few stubborn headlamps, the cast erupted with laughter at her Nicholson impression, exaggerated and manic. It was the kind of moment no one had planned, and no one would ever forget. That same week, a snowstorm buried the access road, stranding the entire team for 72 hours. No trucks in. No trucks out. And so, they adapted. They filmed interior scenes in daylight and rehearsed on stairwells by lantern. Crew members bunked on couches. Some built a makeshift sled out of a dolly and raced it down the service hill. The sound team, ever resourceful, recorded the storm itself from 3 vantage points, capturing a howl so bone-deep it made its way into the film's climax. "We wanted the mountain to have a voice," said lead sound designer Mateo Ruiz. Then the mountain spoke. Relationships began to form in the quiet spaces between chaos. 2 crew members fell in love, one from costumes, one from lighting. They kept it secret until wrap day, when they carved their initials into a birch tree behind the lodge. Ella and Theo, despite their intense on-screen dynamic, became almost sibling-like off-camera, teasing one another relentlessly. During one particularly tense scene in the mines, she slipped a sticky note into his prop flashlight that read, "Your breath smells like fear." He broke character for the first and only time. Still, the shoot was not without its true challenges. A faulty heating unit in the sanatorium set meant several scenes had to be filmed in sub-zero temperatures. Actors delivered lines through chattering teeth. One suffered minor frostbite. The crew responded by rigging a series of heat lamps hidden behind the camera, nicknamed dragons, which actors would huddle near between takes. And then there was the bear. Yes, the bear. During a quiet afternoon shoot near the forest's edge, an actual grizzly wandered onto the set. Cameras were rolling. At first, everyone assumed it was a crew member in costume, until it reared onto its hind legs and let out a growl that silenced everything. No one moved. Not even the wind. It lingered for nearly 3 full minutes before lumbering off into the trees. The footage exists, but was never used. It felt too real. Too alive. "We were making a horror film," Berenger later said, "but that was nature reminding us who tells the best stories." Props were another source of mischief and surprise. The antique Ouija board used in a pivotal scene was acquired from a collector in Vermont, who claimed it had history. No one believed him, until the board was moved to storage and somehow kept returning to the same shelf in the set's prop room, day after day. After wrap, it was gifted to the editor as a joke. She mailed it back, anonymously, 6 months later. Lighting was its own character on set. Every shot was composed with a reverence for shadow. The crew often worked in near darkness, illuminated only by practicals, lanterns, flares, dying flashlights. One night, a lighting tech named Jules took it upon himself to test different LED temperatures by walking the perimeter of the set with a prototype rig. He got lost for nearly an hour, radio silent, before finally emerging, drenched in sweat, muttering about seeing lights in the trees that weren't his. No one teased him. Not after that. Berenger fostered a unique rhythm on set, demanding precision but never stifling spontaneity. She encouraged improvisation. If a scene felt too scripted, she'd pull the actors aside, let them walk the space, and talk it through like a memory instead of a moment. One of the film's most emotional beats, Sam finding a bloodied shoe that belonged to a friend, was born this way. No scripted dialogue. Just silence, breath, and a single tear that wasn't planned. By the final week of filming, no one wanted to leave. Despite the cold, the breakdowns, the phantom whispers, there was a sense of something sacred having been shared. A shared dream. Or a shared nightmare. The wrap party was modest. A bonfire behind the lodge, mismatched mugs filled with whiskey, a speaker playing a lo-fi playlist someone titled Blackwood Mountain Blues. Cast and crew danced in snow boots, drank until the stars blurred, and made promises to see each other again. As dawn crept over the peaks, someone read aloud the final line from the shooting script, "The mountain will always remember." And it felt true. Because by then, the mountain had remembered them. Their laughter. Their fear. Their whispers in the dark. And maybe, in the quietest corner of the forest, the wind still carries a trace of it. Sometimes, when you watch until dawn, and the screen fades to black between scenes, you can almost hear it. The footsteps in snow. The echo of a laugh. The silence that feels too heavy. That's not just the film working. That's the memory of what happened behind the scenes. And memory, on Blackwood Mountain, is never quite dead. Snow falls differently on Blackwood Mountain. Not like it does in the rest of the world, soft and pure and fleeting, but as if it's trying to cover something. Like a shroud. Each flake a small hush over a long-buried scream. In Until Dawn, 2025, the snow doesn't cleanse, it conceals. It settles on memories, on trauma, on guilt. And slowly, as the film unfolds beneath its silent weight, that snow begins to melt, not into spring, but into revelation. This is a story about survival, yes. But more than that, it's about what survival costs, what it reveals, and what it refuses to forgive. At its icy heart, Until Dawn is a film about consequence. Every character, every action, and every shadow cast in firelight serves as an echo of a choice, sometimes one made long ago, sometimes one unfolding in the moment. The mountain isn't just a backdrop for terror. It is the crucible in which these decisions are burned into permanence. What makes the story resonate isn't just the horror itself, but the moral weight tethered to it. The first theme that rises, like mist off the thawing ground, is guilt. It clings to the film's spine, woven through its characters like thread through torn fabric. Josh, played with unsettling vulnerability by Theo Carr, embodies it most clearly. His mind fractures beneath the weight of a past he cannot outrun, the disappearance of his sisters, the blame he both denies and absorbs. But it isn't just about what he did or didn't do. It's about how trauma warps time. How it builds a hall of mirrors where guilt reflects endlessly, each version darker than the last. Josh doesn't just see ghosts. He becomes them. In dreamlike interludes, his vision becomes the audience's. Snow falling indoors, laughter echoing down empty corridors, blood that refuses to be washed away. These sequences are more than hallucinations. They're symbolic journeys inward, visual metaphors for how memory calcifies into obsession. The mountain doesn't haunt him. He haunts it. And that inversion, of man becoming the phantom, is one of the film's most powerful undercurrents. Closely entwined with guilt is the theme of denial. Almost every character clings to some version of it, however fragile. Jess masks fear with flirtation. Emily uses control to stave off helplessness. Matt defers, always trying to placate, to avoid confrontation at any cost. But the mountain doesn't allow evasion. Its silence is confrontational. Its darkness peels away pretense. Slowly, sometimes brutally, it forces truth into the open, not as confession, but as exposure. That's the cruelty of it. No redemption is offered. Only reckoning. Symbolism courses through the film like veins beneath pale skin, subtle but vital. The cable car, first seen gliding above the abyss like a pendulum, serves as more than transportation. It's liminal space. The moment between the known and the unknown, between the safety of the past and the treacherous ground of the present. Every time it crosses the chasm, it's a rebirth, a shedding of the world below. And once you're on the mountain, you're no longer quite yourself. You're what the mountain needs you to be. Mirrors appear frequently, but almost never reflect clearly. They're cracked, fogged, blood-streaked. They remind the characters, and the audience, that identity here is mutable. Who you think you are shifts under pressure. In one scene, Sam stares into a fractured mirror as whispers swell around her. Her face splits, multiplies. It's not just horror, it's a question. Who am I when no one is watching? And more urgently, who am I when something is? Ana Lucia Bryan, whose previous work in psychological dramas made her no stranger to atmospheric subtlety, brought a haunting stillness to the lens. Many shots were composed with negative space in mind. Empty corners, darkened hallways, wide forest expanses where something could be lurking, but wasn't. Not yet. The fear came from waiting. From expectation. Characters were often shot off-center, giving the frame a sense of imbalance, as if the world around them refused to behave. Wide-angle lenses were sparingly used in key moments to distort perspective, especially in interior scenes, making rooms feel unnaturally stretched, larger than they should be, deeper than they were. Perhaps most effective, though, was the use of long takes. Not in the showy, continuous one-shot tradition, but in quiet, deliberate tracking shots that forced viewers to sit with the characters in real time. A flashlight moving down a hallway. A character turning slowly, afraid to look but unable not to. These shots weren't about spectacle. They were about surrender, dragging the audience into a moment and not letting them escape. Lighting was another cornerstone of the film's tone. Instead of traditional horror contrasts, harsh lighting, sharp shadows, Berenger opted for what she called naturalistic distortion. Light sources in the film were diegetic, lanterns, candles, flares, fires. Each carried its own color temperature and emotional undertone. Flares cast sickly red hues, making snow appear like blood. Lanterns flickered unpredictably, creating a breathing effect. Flashlights were often dimmed manually to create tension, pools of light barely reaching the edges of the frame. In one unforgettable sequence deep in the mines, a character's flashlight sputters, casting the frame into rhythmic bursts of darkness. The flickering light reveals fragments, a wall, a glint of eyes, the hint of movement. But never the full picture. The horror lives in what remains unseen. This was no accident. The gaffer team, led by Devon Tao, rigged custom dimming controllers to simulate electrical failure in real time, giving the actors and cinematographer freedom to react in the moment. Sound design in Until Dawn wasn't layered over the film. It was embedded in its marrow. Mateo Ruiz, the sound designer, approached the project with a philosophy. The mountain is alive. Let's make it breathe. And breathe it did. Every gust of wind was recorded on location. Footsteps in snow were captured with different weight distributions and tread depths to match character movement precisely. Even silence was treated carefully, not as an absence of sound, but as a presence. In certain scenes, frequencies were subtly removed to create unease. Viewers couldn't identify it consciously, but their ears noticed something was wrong. One particular sound technique used sparingly but powerfully was infrasound, low-frequency vibrations that can trigger unease and anxiety. Played at nearly imperceptible levels during key moments, they made the audience feel physically unsettled without any visible cause. Pair that with distorted whispers layered under ambient noise, barely audible unless you were straining to hear, and the result was a soundscape that got under your skin. Music was sparing, almost reverent. Composer Isandro Fell used silence as his lead instrument, punctuating it with sudden swells of dissonant strings or an isolated piano motif that returned, slightly altered, throughout the film. The motif mirrored the film's spiral into madness, simple at first, then fractured, reversed, stretched. In one instance, it plays faintly from a snow-covered music box found in an abandoned cabin. The same melody appears again hours later, slowed to near unrecognizability, playing over a character's final moments. It isn't just a cue, it's a memory returning to consume. Editing, overseen by Noel Kim, was executed with surgical restraint. Cuts were hidden wherever possible. Many scenes transitioned not through blackouts but through movement, following a character through a door into the next location, then slowly rotating the camera to find the next horror waiting. Time was often manipulated subtly. Scenes would loop a character's motion once or twice, barely enough to be noticed, to create a dreamlike sensation of déjà vu. In one moment, Sam climbs a staircase that seems to go on forever, the same 2 steps repeating. Viewers felt the repetition but couldn't explain it. That was the point. Jump scares were few, and always earned. The editing rhythm resisted predictability. Sometimes, a scare built for minutes, only to release in nothing but silence. Other times, the cut arrived early, before the threat revealed itself, leaving the audience stranded in anxiety. This denial of payoff became a language of its own. The film wasn't interested in catharsis. It wanted to linger. The performances were shaped by this cinematic ecosystem. The actors weren't reacting to horror, they were inhabiting it. Scenes were shot in long, uninterrupted stretches, allowing emotional arcs to unfold organically. Often, Berenger gave the actors minimal direction between takes, preferring to let the environment and tension guide their choices. The result was a series of performances that felt raw, not rehearsed. Tears didn't always fall at the right moment. Screams sometimes caught in throats. And in the stillness, there was honesty. The production itself, while intimate in tone, was a beast in scale. Shot over 72 days, much of it in freezing temperatures and rugged terrain, the film operated more like an expedition than a studio shoot. Crews hauled equipment through snowbanks and up rocky inclines. Drones captured aerial footage at dawn, piloted manually to match the mountain's unpredictable winds. A specialty team was hired to rig cameras through crevices and over cliffs, creating a sense of vertigo during certain chase scenes. No location was cheated. If you see a cliff, they climbed it. If you see snow on a character's lashes, it froze there. And audiences noticed. When Until Dawn opened in theaters, it didn't arrive with the thunder of a blockbuster. It crept in. Word spread slowly, whispered in online forums and late-night conversations. It's different, people said. It's not just scary. It gets inside you. What began as a niche release soon exploded into a cultural moment. Horror fans praised its restraint. Critics lauded its psychological complexity. And mainstream viewers, drawn in by curiosity, left shaken. The box office reflected this unexpected storm. Opening weekend numbers surpassed projections, fueled by a combination of strong word-of-mouth and an uncanny viral marketing campaign that mirrored the film's themes. Mysterious static-laden clips, coded messages sent to fans, even anonymous postcards from Blackwood Mountain appearing in mailboxes. The campaign didn't scream for attention. It whispered, and people listened. By the end of its theatrical run, Until Dawn had earned over $230 million worldwide on a modest $28 million budget. But beyond profit, it left a mark that money couldn't measure. Film schools dissected its structure. Editors cited its pacing in workshops. Aspiring filmmakers spoke of its restraint as revolutionary. And audiences, those who experienced it in the dark, alone or in breathless theaters, carried its unease long after the credits rolled. What Until Dawn accomplished through its filmmaking was alchemy. It transformed stillness into suspense, light into language, sound into spirit. It didn't need to tell you when to be afraid.